Welcome to the MudRoom, our weekly free Uncommon Sense parenting class. How is everyone today? I hope you're enjoying the last few weeks of summer. It's so hard to believe this summer is flying by so fast. Winter felt like the winter was gonna never end, and here we are just 3 weeks out from school starting back out. Not that I'm super sad about after a year of homeschooling and having my kids home in isolation with me for 18 months. Okay, when I say it like that, it's like the age of a toddler. That's wild. So, yeah, I'm not upset that they're going back to school in 3 weeks, let's put it that way. But I'm also not rushing it. It was really a privilege to be able to have this year with my boys, but that doesn't mean that I won't be really glad to have time to work uninterrupted on a regular basis once they're back in school. Homeschooling wasn't a big deal. Being at home with them wasn't even a big deal. I'm mostly an introvert, so I was perfectly happy to be home with no obligations. But trying to run a company with kids underfoot was extremely difficult for me. I have got lists of upgrades that I want to make to parentability, and I'm absolutely itching to implement them. But I'm also not really interested in snow right now. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that in Canada, the prime time to buy a snowsuit is in August? They're the cheapest and the most readily available. If you wait until the snow hits, they're usually picked over and really expensive. So if you are a Canadian mom and you didn't know that, now's the time to pull out the suit from last year, evaluate if it can make it through another year, and if not, then start looking now. Luckily, both of my kids still fit theirs, so I get to avoid that particular trial right now, but I'm going to be on the hook for new boots. My kids got my dad's feet. Both of them have jumped 2 whole sizes since this time last year. But boots are usually closer to October that you have to start looking, so I get a little bit of a reprieve, but not entirely. Anyways, today we're talking about the zone of proximal development. If you haven't heard that term before, that's okay. I'm going to explain it. If you have, still stick around because you might gain a new perspective on it. Before we get into that, though, allow me to introduce myself for those of you who are new. My name is Alana Robinson, and I'm a parenting coach for parents of toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergartners. I help you understand why your kids are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. I'm your host here on the MudRoom. I'm also the host of the Parenting Posse Facebook group, and I'm the creator of the Parentability program, where I help you raise well-behaved kids of your own. I've been featured on CTV News, Global News, and in Today's Parent magazine, just to name a few. If you're watching, please say hi. This class is pre-recorded, but I'm around. I'll happily answer your questions in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another class. All right, so first things first, what is the zone of proximal development? The zone of proximal development is the difference between what your child can competently do on their own and what they can competently do with help. It's that kind of space in the middle. This concept was developed by Lev Vygotsky, who is a Cold War era Russian child development theorist. I'm not going to go too into Vygotsky in this episode. I did a whole episode on him in the first season of the MudRoom, so if you want more on him in general, you can go listen to that. But the ZDP is his main theory, and one that I use literally daily. I don't know if you've ever had that experience of reading about something, a concept of some kind, and thinking, that's interesting. Makes sense. And then before you know it, somehow that interesting idea has made sense, has become pivotal to everything that you do. But for me, that's the zone of proximal development. In fact, for a really long time, I was hung up on naming my company Zone Parenting. But every time I said it, and I apologize, my Canadian is going to be showing here, but every time I said it, my husband would go, "It's Phil and Snit in the zone," which is from an after-school segment that was on YTV in Canada in the late 90s. So I ended up abandoning it because that was a life sentence I didn't want to give myself. Also, if you got that reference, I hate to break it to you, but it's time for an eye cream. We're getting old. So the zone of proximal development, or it's often shortened to ZDP, is that space between total independence and total support. Or another way to look at it is the difference between doing it all by themselves and you doing it for them. But there's steps in between those two extremes, right? There's different levels of support between those two competencies. And how Vygotsky explained those different levels of support was scaffolding. And I love that mental picture, that visual. Scaffolding is that stuff that we put up to work on tall buildings, right? It's a temporary structure with different levels of platforms so that you can reach things you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. And I think that is a beautiful metaphor. There are different levels of support that we can give to our kids, and with that support, they can reach competency that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. So why is this important? Because one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make is thinking that it's all or nothing. They either have to do it by themselves or they can't do it at all. And remember, this theory was developed during the Cold War. What Vygotsky didn't know is what we now know, which is how energy expenditure and executive functioning skills work. And when viewed in that light, we can see that a child's ZDP is contingent on their stress levels and their skill development. It's not fixed. They require more or less scaffolding depending on their energy levels, depending on what skills the situation is demanding of them. It's relative to the circumstance. So I'm going to give you an exercise that I often give my private coaching clients to help you figure out what the various layers of scaffolding your child needs are for any given task that will help you figure out where you are in any given moment. Because that's where I think most parents get completely tripped up. In the mental gymnastics of, well, what is enough? What is too much? Where do I push? Where do I pull back? And when do I need scaffolding? When do I need support? And how much? So first things first, I want you to sit down with a blank piece of paper and write out all the things your child is having difficulty doing. And I forbid you from writing the word not on that paper even once, okay? This isn't a list of what they're having difficulty not doing. This is a list of things they're having difficulty doing. They aren't having difficulty not hitting their brother. They're having difficulty keeping their hands to themselves when they're upset. You read me? The word not is off limits here. So step 1, list out all the things they're having difficulty doing. Step 2 is to prioritize those things. I usually do this with sticky notes because it's easier for me, but you can do this with note cards or strips of paper, or if you're more digitally inclined, I've done this with a Kanban board or even just a list app. Write one thing on each card or sticky note or strip, and then prioritize them. Which are the biggest deal for you? And which are the least big deal for you? What is mission critical? And what would be nice, but isn't the end of the world? This is going to take a while. I've had parents spend literal weeks on this step, so don't rush it, really consider it. Step 3 is to take that top priority thing, grab another sheet of paper, and at the top of the paper, you're going to write what that competency looks like. So if your top priority is that your child expresses their anger appropriately, the top of that page might say, identifies that they're angry with words and takes space to calm down. If it's that your child puts their shoes on by themselves, it might be puts shoes on independently. What will your child do when they are completely competent at this thing? What does that look like? Be simple, but be specific. And at the bottom of the page, you're going to write what they do now. So going back to the anger example, it might say they throw things and swear and slam doors. Or they bite and charge me and try to hit me. Using the shoes might be whines and falls on the floor when asked to put shoes on. Or stands at the door with a blank expression on their face. Okay? So those are our two extremes. That's the bottom of the scaffold and the top. Step 4 is to write some milestones in between those 2 points. Some parents find it easier to work from top to bottom, others find it easier to work up the page. It's up to you. I'm not here to micromanage how you work best. Some of my clients find it easiest to start by marking a happy middle first. So you've got your 2 extremes. What is the halfway point between them? And then work out from that. And I like to use lined paper because I want these to be small, itty-bitty baby steps. What's 1 step above where they are now? It might just be hesitates to throw something at me when mad. And above that might be picks up something to throw and breaks it instead of throwing it. Okay? Baby steps between those points on the paper. This is your roadmap. What's your first baby step? What's your next baby step after that? And then one after that. How are you going to support your child in climbing this scaffold? Because they aren't just going to leap to the top in a single bound. They aren't Superman. What are the rungs on the ladder between point A and point B? Now, if you're like most parents, you're going to stall out at this point, either because you're overwhelmed by how much work there is to do to bridge that gap, or because you have no idea how to get from point A to point B without just forcing the point B, or you may even be able to map out the steps between the 2 extremes, but even getting up a single level seems like an insurmountable task. And it's at that point that you need to consider your options. What kind of support do you need to complete your scaffold? And who needs that support? Is it you or is it your child? If you're able to map out the steps but you don't know how to accomplish those steps, then you likely need some form of therapist for your child, whether that's an SLP, OT, PT, psychologist, or interventionist. But if you don't even know how to map the steps, if the amount of steps seems insurmountable or overwhelming, that's where you need a parenting coach to guide you. That's what I do. I help you build a bridge from point A to point B, and if we stall out along the way, I guide you on when you may need to pull in those supports to directly support your child. So many parents get stuck in their head trying to figure it out all by themselves, and the truth is, we need scaffolding too. And when it comes to your kids, your ZDP is the difference between what you can get your kids to do all by your lonesome versus what you can help your children, what you can help your children achieve with some support. Because to complete this metaphor, scaffolding interlocks. It is really unstable when it's standing there as a tower all by itself. Even the scaffolding requires supports. So if you're ready to find some support, I'd like to invite you to do 2 things. First, come and join the Parenting Posse Facebook group if you haven't yet. It's our free peer support community, and it's a great first stop for building your personal parenting posse. And second, come and check out my free workshop on how to raise well-behaved kids without yelling, shaming, or timeouts. In it, we walk you through the whole framework that we use to scaffold parents through that process of figuring out your next best step. Both of the links for those are in the description. As always, if you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Don't be shy, drop them in the comment box or tag me on a post in the Parenting Posse. That's it for today. I'll see you next week for another Uncommon Sense parenting class. Bye!